I never imagined my own daughter, Ava, would be capable of such ingratitude, of treating me as such an insignificant figure that she would hide me at her own wedding. My mind, dazed, saw the clear image of my sister Carol occupying my place of honor in the front row, smiling and waving to the guests, while I, the mother of the bride, was a secret to be kept. If you're watching, please subscribe to the channel and comment on which city you're watching from. Ava and Carol had no idea that while I felt invisible and humiliated, the decision that would change everything that day was being formed in my mind, and that the dream ceremony they had orchestrated would indeed be interrupted, but not in the way they had hoped. My name is Grace Anderson, and in my 58 years of life, I never imagined I would experience this situation. Nothing prepared me for the pain of betrayal I felt that day from my own daughter and sister. I always believed a mother's love was a shield, a protective force, but my dedication to Ava and all her dreams was twisted, used against me, to the point of reducing me to something less than a person, a nuisance to be hidden. The life I built with Ava, in our small home in Fairwood, Ohio, was woven with my sweat and my hopes. Every corner of our house, every memory, was a piece of our story. When Ava met Mark and the wedding planning began, I welcomed them with open arms. I dedicated myself to every detail, investing my savings, my time, and all my love to make her day perfect. I cooked for the gatherings, helped choose the dress, and took care of 1,000 details, because that's what a mother does. It was love. It was support. But in Carol's eyes, and in some ways Ava's, every effort I made wasn't an act of kindness, but an easily dismissible obligation. Carol's little comments began, subtle, almost like disguised suggestions. "Grace, maybe it's best to let Carol handle this. She's better at it." Or, "Mom, Aunt Carol already took care of the arrangements. Don't worry." I ignored, or pretended to ignore, her tone. After all, it was Ava's wedding, and I wanted peace. But the pressure mounted, and my role as mother of the bride slowly morphed into that of an unwelcome bystander. I found myself waking up earlier, thinking about how to be helpful, always trying to please, always seeking that recognition, that familial warmth that seemed to be slipping away. Things reached a breaking point when Ava, my own daughter, began agreeing with Carol, or looking away when my ideas were openly dismissed. Her eyes, which had once looked at me with such affection, now looked away when her aunt took her to planning meetings without me. I felt my dignity slipping through my fingers, but I pressed on, because it was my daughter's day, it was her family, and I still believed that love would prevail, until that day. The wedding music echoed softly, and I turned toward the door, my hands clasped tightly. Then, from outside, came the confirmation that the ceremony had begun, and the image of Carol sitting in my place, cold and emotionless, hit me. The shock of that scene was as strong as physical pain. The steam from my tears seemed to burn my eyes, but the flame in my heart was much more intense. In that instant, something inside me shattered, but something far more powerful was born from its ashes. This woman, whom Carol and Ava had seen as a nuisance, a mere guest who could be hidden, was about to show everyone who was truly in charge, and who, in fact, had the power to stop everything. My life, before that devastating day at Willow Creek Farm, was a silent and constant ode to my daughter Ava. I raised her practically alone, working 2 jobs for years, often pulling all-nighters just to make sure she had everything she needed, and more importantly, everything she deserved. Our weekends were filled with walks in the park, reading sessions at the Fairwood City Library, and long conversations about her dreams and aspirations, building an unshakable connection that I believed was the foundation of everything we were. Every sacrifice, every moment of exhaustion, was quickly forgotten when I saw Ava's genuine smile or the sparkle in her eyes when she achieved a small victory. From a very young age, Ava and I shared a relationship that went beyond mother and daughter. We were accomplices, confidants, and the best friends imaginable. I remember nights when she would curl up next to me in the small living room of our Denver apartment, and we would dream together of her future, from the art school she so desperately wanted to attend to the day she would find true love and build her own family. I swore to myself that I would do everything to make each of these dreams come true, saving every penny I could, always focusing on my precious girl's happiness and success. When Ava met Mark, a young engineer with a kind heart and a promising future, I remembered our conversations about love, and my heart filled with indescribable joy. Seeing her so in love, so happy and complete, was the reward for all the years of dedication. Mark seemed like a good guy, attentive to Ava, and I saw in them the makings of a beautiful story. Little things, like the way he occasionally dominated conversations at family dinners, or how Ava seemed a little more hesitant to share certain details of their relationship, surfaced, but I attributed them to the natural nervousness of engagement, or Ava's need to assert her own independence. Wedding planning became a passion project for both of us, a labor of love that consumed months of our lives. We spent countless hours choosing the perfect dress, debating flower colors, and tasting cakes, each decision made with the emotion and lightheartedness that such a significant event deserves. I invested not only my time and energy, but also a considerable portion of my savings, seeing each expense as an investment in my daughter's happiness, a gift I was more than happy to provide for her big day. I wanted everything to be flawless, a reflection of the love Ava and Mark shared. However, as the date approached, a subtle shadow began to cast over our harmony. My sister, Carol, who always had a stronger personality and a tendency to want to control situations, began to become more involved in the preparations. What initially seemed like welcome help soon turned into a series of suggestions that subtly dismissed my ideas or diminished my participation, something I tried to ignore, attributing to her excessive excitement. I remember Ava, on occasion, seeming torn between what her aunt and I wanted, but with the pressure of the impending wedding, I chose to put my concerns aside, focusing solely on the image of a united and happy family. The shadow I mentioned earlier began to grow rapidly, transforming into a constant, suffocating presence. Carol, with her overwhelming energy, went from enthusiastic helper to main organizer, relegating me to an increasingly secondary role. She began making decisions on her own, like choosing the table settings and even the music playlist for the reception, areas where Ava and I had well-defined plans. I tried to intervene, to suggest my ideas, but it was as if my words dissolved into thin air before reaching Ava or Mark's ears. I vividly remember one afternoon, weeks before the wedding, when Ava, Mark, and Carol were gathered at my sister's house for a final review of the details with the decorator from Willow Creek Farm. I wasn't invited. I found out by chance, through a call from a mutual friend who asked if I needed a ride to the meeting. My heart sank in that moment, realizing this wasn't just an oversight, but a deliberate exclusion. When I confronted Ava, she looked uncomfortable and only mumbled something about Carol stepping in to help, a flimsy excuse that didn't allay my growing concern. My opinions, once valued by Ava, were now met with a shrug or an, "Oh, Aunt Carol already took care of that," from Mark. I felt my contributions diminished, my efforts ignored, and a sense of contempt began to consume me. It was as if I was losing my place, not only in the wedding planning, but also in my own daughter's life, being replaced by a figure who, though her aunt, would never share the deep bond Ava and I had built. The humiliation, which had previously been an internal pain, began to manifest itself in small social interactions. At lunch with some family friends, one of them accidentally commented on how Carol was taking over everything, poor thing, with so much work. The comment made me feel small and ashamed, realizing that the perception that I was being marginalized had already spread. Every pitying look, every question about if I needed help for being so missing in the preparations, was a sting that deepened the wound. The final straw before the big day came when I received Carol's final wedding schedule via email. In it, my duties as mother of the bride, which included accompanying Ava during her final moments before the ceremony and walking her down the aisle, had been mysteriously reassigned to Carol. My name was nowhere to be found in the main activities. I called Ava, my voice cracking, asking why. She replied, in a tone that seemed distant, that Carol had a better knack for these things, and that it would be more practical. Those words, coming from my daughter, cut deep, and unbeknownst to me, they prepared me for what was to come on the day of the ceremony. The air in the small back room of Willow Creek Farm seemed to have solidified, making every breath a labored effort. I sat there, not as the mother of the bride, not as the devoted hostess, but as an invisible prisoner on a day that should have been the purest celebration of love. The sound of the wedding march, which had begun to play outside, echoed like a drum in my chest, each beat a bitter confirmation that marriage my daughter's life was beginning, and I, the woman who brought her into the world and dedicated herself to everything, wasn't there. I wasn't there to hold her hand, to dry a tear of happiness, to whisper the last words of encouragement. I was erased, my presence ignored in one of the most important moments of her life, a drama familiar that unfolded in silence for me, but in pomp and circumstance for the rest of the world. At that moment, the pain, humiliation, and of the family disrespect that had been building for weeks, even months, reached its peak. It was no longer about a forgotten detail, a missed invitation, or an ignored suggestion. It was about my essence, my role, my dignity as a mother. The image of Carol, my own sister, sitting in the front row, smiling and waving to the guests, shamelessly taking my place of honor, burned into my mind with the force of a hot iron. I realized, with icy clarity, that this was no accident or miscommunication. It was a deliberate act of family betrayal, a silent and cruel strategy to remove me from the scene, to make me disappear. The veil of hope I still tried to maintain, the belief that everything would work out, was torn to shreds by the brutality of that realization. It was then that a flash of every early morning waking up, the smell of coffee brewed before sunrise, all the overtime worked at 2 jobs to pay the bills, every financial sacrifice to ensure Ava had the best, ballet lessons, new books, a good college, every minute dedicated to her, flashed before my eyes. I worked tirelessly, giving myself completely so she could have the best, so her dreams could come true. I remembered the nights she would cuddle up next to me, the whispered conversations about her fears and aspirations. I was her safe haven, her greatest cheerleader. And this now was the thanks? To be hidden, silenced, like a shameful secret? My heart, which moments before had felt shattered, transformed its sadness into a silent, cold, and determined rage. I would cry no more. The tears would give way to a strength I had underestimated within myself, cry for recognition who cried out for justice. My eyes fixed on the locked door of the small room, the physical barrier that symbolized the family exclusion that I was suffering. Every muffled laugh, every indistinct applause I heard from outside was a sharp sting in my soul, but also, paradoxically, fuel for my resolve. I would not be a passive victim in this real wedding story that turned into a wedding drama cruelly orchestrated. There was no more room for what-ifs or the vain hope that someone would come for me, that Ava, in her bridal glow, would finally remember the mother who waited for her. The responsibility for myself and my dignity, who has always been an unshakable pillar of my life, cried out for action, for an attitude that would do justice to all the years of dedication and love. My mind, previously clouded by grief, now operated with disturbing clarity. The thought of standing there, watching, accepting my fate, was more terrifying than any confrontation. This wedding, the most important day of Ava's life, could not, and should not, be built on a family life and the erasure of my existence. If they wanted to erase me, I would make sure my absence was felt in a way no one would ever forget. The ruined marriage would be the price of my humiliation, not out of malice, but to expose the naked truth. My difficult decision was not an act of petty revenge, but of self-affirmation, to rescue my own identity. And it was there, at the height of my pain and anger, that a difficult and irreversible decision was taken. A calm but firm voice echoed in my mind. Enough. I would not allow the ceremony to continue as if nothing had happened, as if I didn't exist, as if the bride's mother were an irrelevant detail to be hidden. Did they want to erase me? I would make sure my absence was felt in a way no one would ever forget. Ruined marriage would be the price of my humiliation. I wasn't just standing up. I was declaring war on the invisibility they tried to impose on me. From that moment on, I would be the force that would make everything stop. I needed a plan, a way to interrupt marriage that would be effective and unquestionable. It couldn't be a mere tantrum or a pointless scandal. It had to be calculated, precise, like a bolt from the blue. And above all, it had to expose the injustice, undeniably. The door, once a barrier, has now become a threshold to be crossed. My day of resilience and empowerment would start there, at that moment. At that very moment, inside that stuffy, forgotten little room at Willow Creek Farm, what I felt wasn't just sadness or anger, but a cold, piercing clarity. Humiliation had hit me in its purest form, not just as an emotional blow, but as the nullification of my existence on what was supposed to be one of the most important days of my life. I was no longer the mother of the bride. I was the shadow they tried to push under the mat, an unwanted figure in his own drama. The decision, once a whisper of indignation, now echoed like a scream in my mind. I will stop this. But how? And what did that really mean? My heart was pounding wildly, and my hands, previously trembling with joy and anxiety, now clutched each other with restrained strength. The idea of revenge wasn't about causing unnecessary pain or destroying Ava's happiness, but about reaffirming my dignity and the truth of my journey as a mother. It was about showing that, even hidden, I still existed, and my voice deserved to be heard. Marriage of them could not continue based on a family life, and in mine deliberate exclusion. What I planned was not just a disruption, but a wake-up call, a jolt for everyone, especially Ava, to see the injustice that was being committed. I needed a plan, and I needed it now, before it was too late, and the yes was pronounced, cementing this farce. With my head held high and a determination that surprised me, I opened the door to that small room. The sounds of the party hit me even more strongly now. Laughter, hubbub, the soft music that preceded the bride's entrance. My body trembled, but not from fear, but from an adrenaline rush that propelled me to action. My eyes scanned the scene, searching for someone, anyone, who could help me untie this knot. I couldn't simply scream or make a fuss. My action needed to be precise, impactful, and, above all, strategic. I wouldn't be the crazy, vengeful mother. I would be the mother who refused to be erased. It was an act of self-affirmation, not of cruelty. My gaze fell on Susan Jenkins, the wedding planner. She stood near the main entrance, adjusting Ava's train, a look of subtle concern on her professional face. Susan was known for her efficiency and her unassuming nature, but I knew she was also a woman of principle. She had been the only one who, at times, looked at me with some bewilderment when Carol took the reins. I walked over to her, my steps firm, my gaze meeting hers. I saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes, perhaps at seeing me there, so close to the start of the ceremony, and even more so at the unwavering expression on my face. "Susan," I began, my voice an urgent whisper, but charged with an authority I hadn't known I possessed. "We need to talk. Now." Susan, with her usual calm, nodded and led me to a less visible corner, but still with a view of the altar. "I'm being excluded from my own daughter's wedding," I declared, getting straight to the point without beating around the bush or whining. "I've been placed in a room, and Carol, my sister, has taken my place. I paid for much of this wedding, Susan. I'm the mother of the bride, and I can't allow this ceremony to go on under these circumstances. Disrespect and betrayal." Susan's expression changed from surprise to dark understanding. She knew me, knew of my investment and my love for Ava. The wedding planner looked me in the eye, quickly processing my words. She knew I wasn't acting on a whim. "Mrs. Anderson," she said, using my full last name for the first time with a tone of seriousness that gave me a glimmer of hope. "I've noticed some strange things, yes. Carol has been, let's say, quite assertive. But what exactly do you want me to do?" Her blue eyes, usually so focused on the details of the decor, now fixed on me, waiting for my difficult decision. I knew she had the means, the knowledge of contracts, the suppliers. She was the key to interruption of marriage without causing irreparable chaos, but with the necessary impact. "I want you to stop the ceremony," I said, feeling the force in my words, not violently or disruptively. "I want you to use your authority as planner to inform them that the ceremony cannot proceed. Tell them there is a serious contractual issue, something that requires immediate attention from those responsible. And I want everyone to know that I am the one responsible, the true sponsor of this event. That was bold, I knew, and would cause a stir-family clash, but it was the only way to claim my place and expose the family injustice that was unfolding. It wasn't about maternal revenge by itself, but about the truth. Susan pondered for a moment, her eyes scanning the crowd of guests, then returning to me. This will cause quite an uproar, Mrs. Anderson, she warned, her voice low. Ava and Mark will be devastated. The thought of seeing Ava sad hit me, but the weight of exclusion and the humiliation of what I was feeling was bigger. It was an impossible choice, but I needed to show Ava and everyone that you couldn't just erase a mother. I understand the consequences, Susan, I replied, my voice firm. But the consequences of my invisibility, of my pain, are already happening. If they want to have a happy marriage, it needs to be built on truth and respect. I will not be the shameful secret behind their happiness. The wedding day is theirs, but my dignity is mine. The plan began to take shape. Susan briefed me on the contract terms and the supplier's obligations. My name, as the primary guarantor and payer of a large portion of the costs, was my greatest weapon. She explained that if I, as the primary client, declared a breach of terms or an inability to proceed, most suppliers, to protect their own interests and avoid litigation, would be forced to stop. The idea wasn't to ruin the day, but to suspend it, so that the truth would come out before it was too late. It was a turnaround in marriage, one decisive moment where I would not just react, but act with purpose. And so it was that, in that small room, a humiliated and excluded mother decided to rewrite her own destiny and that of her daughter, in what would become the wedding day most unforgettable of all. The brief silence that followed my statement to Susan Jenkins was charged with an almost palpable tension. Her professional eyes, which a moment before had been scanning the impeccable organization of the space, now regarded me with a mixture of apprehension and, I dare say, a certain admiration for my difficult decision. She was a seasoned professional. She'd seen it all, but I knew that a request to stop a wedding at the last minute was rare and, for many, unthinkable. Mrs. Anderson, she began, her voice low and controlled, do you understand the magnitude of what you're asking? This will be a shock to everyone, especially Ava. I stared at her, the coldness in my gaze befitting the gravity of the moment. I understand, Susan, and the magnitude of the humiliation I'm suffering, the family exclusion being imposed, is also immense. It's not a whim, it's a matter of dignity and respect. I cannot allow my daughter's wedding to begin with a lie and my deliberate absence. Susan, with a slow nod, seemed to consider each word. She knew I was the primary payer, responsible for most of the vendor contracts, and this gave me considerable leverage. She had a code of conduct, but also a business to protect. My position, though painful, was strong. Very well, she finally said with a barely audible sigh. We'll need to be quick and discreet. I have the contact details for all the major suppliers here. What do you have in the way of payment receipts that link directly to you, not Carol? That question brought me a small inner victory. From the beginning, I had insisted that all invoices be in my name and that payments be made from my personal account. I pulled out my phone and quickly opened the banking app, showing her the hefty transactions for Willow Creek Farm, the florist, the caterer, the band. With each confirmation on her face, I felt a little more power return. I was regaining control. As Susan began making discreet calls on her own cell phone, speaking in a low, professional voice, I watched her, my heart pounding in my chest. She contacted the farm manager, explaining the situation as an unexpected contractual emergency that required a brief suspension of the ceremony. She then spoke to the DJ, asking him to pause the music and make an announcement about a slight technical delay, ensuring the interruption would be perceived as a logistical issue rather than an explicit family drama, at least not initially. I noticed curious looks from some guests who were settling in, but Susan's professionalism prevented any panic. My mind raced, reliving the past few months. I wondered if I was doing the right thing, if Ava would ever forgive me. But then the image of Carol, with that smug smile sitting in my seat, returned, and Ava's distant voice telling her Carol was better. The hurt, the feeling of being replaced and erased, was a fire that burned away any regret. I needed Ava to understand. I needed everyone to understand that a mother is not an accessory to be simply discarded. This wasn't just a plan for interruption. It was a cry for recognition. Susan approached again, her face pale but determined. I did it. The farm manager is on his way to the altar to make the announcement. The vendors have been informed that there is a critical major client issue that needs to be resolved before anything else. The music will stop shortly, and then the announcement will be made. She looked at me seriously. Are you ready, Mrs. Anderson? There will be no turning back after this. It will be a turning point in the wedding that will go down in Willow Creek Farm history. The question hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. I took a deep breath, the scent of fresh flowers mingling with the nervousness of the crowd. My eyes fixed on Ava, who stood in the garden, out of sight of most of the guests, but visible to me from where I stood, accompanied by her bridesmaids, and ironically, Carol. She looked beautiful, her white dress shimmering in the afternoon sun. A lump formed in my throat, but I swallowed it. This wasn't about me versus Ava. It was about the truth, about the family betrayal that had been orchestrated behind my back. I needed her to see the truth, even if it hurt. The tension in the air began to intensify. The guests' chatter subsided slightly, and the string quartet's soft music, which had been playing romantic melodies, began to fade note by note. The silence that followed was almost deafening, broken only by a few confused murmurs. All eyes turned to the altar, where the farm manager, Mr. Thompson, a burly man with a microphone in his hand, ascended the few steps, his face serious. Ava, Mark, and their groomsmen were still nowhere in sight, which was a small relief, as the impact would be felt by them in a different way. When Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, the sound echoed through the barn and the surrounding fields. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his deep voice booming, "we regret to inform you that due to an unforeseen and very serious contractual issue with the primary event planner, the ceremony will need to be suspended indefinitely. We ask for everyone's understanding as we attempt to resolve this situation." A loud, confused murmur swept through the crowd. I could see the puzzled looks, the whispers, the cell phones being raised. The consequences of my plan were beginning to unfold, and the wedding drama was about to explode. Susan gave me a little push, a silent signal. "Now it's your turn, Mrs. Anderson. The attention is on you, or rather, on the problem you pose to them." I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs. My breathing was labored, but my determination was even stronger. I began walking toward the center of the barn, my eyes fixed on the altar, where Carol and a few other nearby guests now looked especially shocked and confused. I could feel the gazes of hundreds of people on me, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. The stage was set. I, the mother they tried to hide, was about to make an entrance no one would ever forget. The decisive moment had arrived. My story of injustice was about to be revealed. Each step I took toward the altar was an act of courage, a reaffirmation of my existence amidst a sea of shocked and confused faces. The murmur in the crowd grew louder as I advanced, my eyes fixed not on the ground, but on the guests, searching for any sign of understanding, or at least that my presence was no longer a surprise. I saw Carol, my sister, in the front row, her once smiling face now pale with shock and suppressed fury. She tried to stand, an instinctive gesture of interruption, but was stopped by a stern look from Susan Jenkins, the wedding planner, who stood beside me, a silent and strong support. I knew that execution of the plan was in full swing, and the climax of this drama was just beginning. When I got close enough to be heard, even though the microphone was with Mr. Thompson, the farm manager, I didn't need it. My voice, though slightly shaky, carried a clarity and authority that seemed to come from a place deep within me. "Mr. Thompson offered me the microphone, a gesture of respect for my position as the principal person for the event, and I took it, feeling the weight of the moment. The silence in the barn was absolute, all eyes fixed on me, waiting for an explanation, for a resolution to the matter. Interruption of marriage. "Good afternoon, everyone," I began, my voice echoing slightly, but with a firmness that surprised me. "I deeply regret that this long-awaited day has been interrupted in this way, but unfortunately, I was given no other option." I paused briefly, scanning the audience. For those who don't recognize me, I am Grace Anderson, Ava's mother. There was another murmur, this time of surprise and confusion, especially among the guests outside our inner circle. I felt the heat of Carol's gaze, who was now standing, her eyes flashing. I should have been by my daughter's side right now. I should have helped arrange her dress. I should have been in the front row witnessing this new chapter in her life, I continued, emotion beginning to permeate my words, but I maintained control. Instead, I was taken to a small back room where I was deliberately hidden and ignored. My own sister, Carol, took my place of honor, and my presence was treated as a shameful secret. At these words, a wave of shock swept through the crowd. Some guests turned to Carol, who now seemed to want to hide. Ava, who had been brought into the barn by one of the groomsmen to understand what was happening, stood at the entrance, her beautiful face now distorted in an expression of confusion and terror. Mark stood beside her, looking equally shocked. His eyes met mine, and I saw the bewilderment, the pain, and perhaps a hint of anger. "Ava," I said, directing my voice toward her, feeling my heart tighten, but knowing it was necessary. "I love you more than anything in this world. I raised you alone. I worked tirelessly to give you everything you needed and dreamed of. And so much of this wedding, every flower, every plate of food, every detail, was paid for with my effort, my sacrifice, my love." I took an envelope Susan discreetly handed me, containing copies of the main payment receipts. "These are the receipts. I am the main client for this event, responsible for almost all of the costs. And as the main sponsor, and the mother who was excluded and humiliated, I cannot allow this ceremony to proceed while I am treated as if I don't exist." The words struck everyone like a thunderbolt. The silence was so heavy, I could hear my own breathing. Revelation was public and undeniable. Carol, unable to contain her anger and embarrassment, erupted. "Grace, what are you doing? You're ruining your own daughter's wedding." Her words resonated, but I didn't let them sway me. "I'm not ruining it, Carol. I'm exposing family betrayal and the disrespect that you orchestrated. And Ava needs to know the truth. One marriage is built on secrets and exclusion. It's not a strong marriage." My gaze returned to Ava, who was now crying, her shoulders shaking. Mark tried to calm her, but her eyes were also fixed on me, a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Ava, please," I continued, my voice softer now. "I only want what's best for you. I want this to be the happiest day of your life, but I can't be invisible to make it happen. I can't be a shadow in your happiness. I need you to see me, to understand the depth of my pain and my injustice that was done to me." Tears were streaming down my face now, too, but they were tears of determination, not weakness. Mark, his tone defensive, finally spoke up. "Mrs. Anderson, this isn't the time for this. You're humiliating Ava." I glared at him. "And where were you, Mark, when I was being humiliated and excluded? You and Ava allowed Carol to take my place. This wedding, which I helped finance with my hard work and love, was being held without my presence, without my consent, as the mother and primary sponsor." The revelation about the money seemed to hit Mark differently, and his face grew even paler. "Therefore," I declared, my voice returning to its original firmness, "as the legal and financially responsible party for much of this event, and as the mother who was prevented from fulfilling her honored role, I exercise my right. Unless Carol is immediately removed from her honored position and I am reinstated to my rightful place as mother of the bride, the ceremony is canceled. All vendors are under my contract, and they are instructed to cease service until my demands are met." The impact of my words was seismic. Whispers and gasps of shock echoed. Ruined marriages hung in the air. It was an all-or-nothing gamble, a turnaround in marriage that no one expected. Ava looked at Mark, then at Carol, her eyes filled with tears and confusion. What I had exposed was not just my pain, but an uncomfortable truth about Carol's control and Ava and Mark's silent complicity. The ball was now in their court. My plan was complete. The climax, it was their choice. I, the mother they tried to hide, was there, visible, unwavering, and demanding my rightful place. The silence that followed was one of the longest and most tense of my life, a testament to the power of truth and restored dignity. The silence that followed Ava's embrace, there in the middle of the barn, with all eyes on us, was a balm to my wounded soul. It wasn't a silence of embarrassment or shame, but a silence of understanding, relief, and reconciliation. Our tears mingled, and in that moment, I felt the weight of months of invisibility and humiliation began to dissipate. Mark, though still visibly shaken and embarrassed, came closer, his eyes searching mine, and murmured a sincere apology. His voice, previously defensive, now sounded broken, and I saw genuine recognition in his gaze, not only of my suffering, but of the grave lapse in judgment on his and Ava's part. The ceremony resumed with a new tone, a palpable seriousness that hadn't been there before. Every word of the officiant, every note of the string quartet seemed charged with a deeper meaning. I was seated in the front row, next to Ava, who held my hand tightly for much of the service. Carol's seat was empty, an absence that spoke volumes about the consequences of his actions. I felt no triumph or revenge, but a quiet peace, the certainty of having done what was right, of having reaffirmed my dignity when all they wanted was to erase me. In the days and weeks following the wedding, Willow Creek Farm became a landmark in our family history, a turning point that changed the dynamic forever. Ava and I had long conversations, filled with tears and revelations. She confessed that Carol, ever the manipulator, had subtly instigated the idea that I was too stressed or too involved, suggesting that Ava needed space and a more modern, cool figure to help with the preparations. Ava, in her excitement and the pressure to have a perfect wedding, had gotten carried away, not realizing how far Carol would go or how painful the impact would be for me. That day served as a painful but necessary awakening for Ava. She realized that, in her pursuit of a dream day, she had forgotten who was truly by her side, who had made countless sacrifices for her. She apologized not only for her actions, but for her blindness, for her failure to protect me and recognize the family betrayal going on. Our relationship, once built on a foundation of unconditional love, was now being rebuilt with an extra layer of brutal honesty and a deeper understanding of the complexities of love and family. Ava began calling me more frequently, not just to chat about trivialities, but to seek advice, to share her fears and joys, valuing my experience and support like never before. The distance Carol had tried to create dissolved, giving way to an even greater closeness. Mark also transformed. The incident at the wedding shocked him deeply, making him reflect on his own passivity and how he had allowed Carol's influence to overshadow my role. He sought me out, alone, for coffee, and sincerely apologized for not standing up for me, for not realizing what was happening right under his eyes. He promised to be a more attentive husband and a more respectful in-law, and I saw in his subsequent actions that he was determined to keep that promise. He began communicating more openly, inquiring about my health and well-being, and genuinely including me in his lives, showing that respect was not just a word, but a value that he now cherished. As for Carol, the execution of my plan had consequences devastating for her. Her reputation within her family and friends was irreparably tarnished. People who had previously admired her for her energy and organizational skills now viewed her with distrust and even revulsion, realizing the manipulation and cruelty she had demonstrated. She tried to justify her actions by spreading rumors about my supposed emotional instability, but the truth had already been exposed publicly, and the payment receipts I had presented were irrefutable. There was an almost complete break with her. At future family events, she was avoided, her space, once filled with her constant chatter, now marked by an awkward silence. For me, there was no longer room for resentment, only an acceptance that not all relationships can be saved, and that self-care and to protection of my own peace were priorities. My own life, which had previously revolved around Ava, found new purpose. That day taught me the importance of setting boundaries, of putting myself first when necessary. I began exploring hobbies I'd neglected for years, like painting and gardening. I joined a book group, made new friends, and even started planning a small business journey of discovery along the California coast, something I'd always dreamed of doing. The strength I'd found in that moment of crisis didn't fade. It became an integral part of who I am. I learned that dignity is not something that is given to us, but something we must claim and protect with all our strength. My story of injustice turned into an empowerment narrative. The final moral I draw from all of this is profound and extends to all of you watching. In a world where social pressure and family expectations can lead us to silence our own voice, it's crucial to remember that our worth is not defined by the validation of others. Your love, your time, and your sacrifices deserve to be recognized and respected. Don't let ingratitude and your manipulation of other people diminish it. Whether in a wedding drama, in a family conflict, or in any decisive moment of your life, have the courage to stand up, to speak your truth, and to claim your place. Escaping from conflict isn't always easy, but the peace that comes from honoring yourself is priceless. Life, with its unexpected twists and turns, offers us the chance to rewrite our stories, not as victims, but as protagonists of our own lives. Journey of Overcoming. I'm Grace Anderson, and this is my proof that even when you feel hidden, you always have the power to show up and make your voice heard. It is this life story that touched you, gave you the courage to stand up for your truth, or reminded you of the importance of family respect. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. Leave a like to show your support, and comment below which part resonated with you the most, or if you've experienced something similar. Your experience and your voice mean a lot to us.